And
Yep.
now we're going to bring on our next guest. So anytime, Yvonne, you want to get off of the screen.
Yeah, I'm gonna let
Yeah.
the stage and you guys go ahead.
Yeah, coming back and forth, and we'll come back in. So me and Yvonne will be back and forth for discussions and talking. And I'm going to introduce this next person, inshallah, who is awesome. So the next person that we have in
Walaikum to you.
The next person that we have is Dr. T.K. Harris, subhanAllah. He actually was instrumental, Mufti Manik was instrumental in bringing Dr. Harris's books and media to the attention of the public. He actually trained in medicine in Oxford, and his books are helping people to live a life in a practical way by connecting to the Islamic with the medical. How awesome is that? And so that's why I'm so honored that he's here today. His latest book, Tayyib, addresses the matter of fasting, nutrition, spiritual health in Ramadan, and he works entirely for the good for the people. SubhanAllah, he has an awesome YouTube channel, Instagram, blog. So we're going to go ahead and bring him on now board.
And thank you for your time today. Assalamu alaikum to you all, and thank you for your time today. May Allah bless our Prophet and his family as he does all of us today, and may we all find ways to live contentedly and humbly with submission to Allah's way written firmly on our hearts. Ameen. My name is Dr. T.K. Harris, and I'm a neuropsychiatrist. I'm a doctor who specializes in the mind. I now write books and create media, fi sabilillah, entirely for the benefit of people of faith, to live happier, more fulfilled, more pious lives, in keeping with science and with religious teachings. I started doing this at the behest of an old friend known as Mufti Menk, who is obviously known worldwide, and I've not looked back ever since. Sometimes when you get the feeling you have found a good thing, I guess everything else seems to be lightened, alhamdulillah. About me, I went to med school in England some 25 years ago and worked as a psychiatrist for a good 20 years. But I started working for Muslimin a couple of years ago, and I've written 5 books so far, all connecting medical and mental health with Islamic know-how. So today I will talk to you about the concept of dealing with our food and our weight in a Tayyib way. It happens to be the subject of one of my books, which is called Tayyib, but you really don't need to buy a book to understand it, so this isn't a plug. The book just puts into one place what our religion teaches us anyway, and hopefully I can give you an idea from this talk. And it's all about having a Tayyib Ramadan, because this blessed month is upon us. So, start off by asking any Muslim what halal is, and pretty much any Muslim will be able to tell you what halal is. But many Muslims don't know what tayyib is. And yet the Quran itself tells us in the same sentence to consume things that are both halal and tayyib. To give you a quick answer, tayyib means wholesome, right, good, local, fresh, simple. But it refers to more than just food. It refers to a way of life and a way of thinking. If you like, it kind of maps onto what modern trends would describe as sustainability, responsibility, organic, kindness, humanity, ecology, and those sorts of things. And in a psychological sense, tayyib expands to mean everything about the way you relate to your food and to eating, and in a wider sense still, how you conduct your life. And this brings us why we are talking about having a Tayyib Ramadan. Because if you do things in a Tayyib way in Ramadan, you can control your weight. If you think in a Tayyib way, you will also improve your well-being, and you'll control your weight, and you'll have a much more enjoyable Ramadan. The point of Ramadan is not as a test, it's actually more of a sanctuary. It's a place of relief and rest. In fact, it derives from the Arabic word meaning rest. So it's a refreshment for the body by resetting the gut and giving it a proper rest, and refreshing the mind by, well, directly better nutrition and better control of sugar and cholesterol, but all the benefits that come from the other things that we do in a Tayyib Ramadan, which are broadly moderation and mindfulness. Now, we understand moderation, but there's a word you hear bandied around a lot these days, the word mindfulness. Now, could it be that this Western word has made it into our practice as a bid'ah? Not at all, brothers and sisters. In fact, mindfulness literally means being more mindful, which means sort of remembering your awareness, bringing your awareness to the front. And interestingly, the Arabic word for that is dhikr. That's right. The very act of remembering Allah, being in touch with any moment in your day, of feeling closer to the divine, is an integral part of Islam. And remember that dhikr is just a direct act of mindfulness. In fact, the most mindful act we could do in our day-to-day life is salah. Doing with salah is directly an effort to be mindful of our existence on earth and to enact that in a way that is sort of connecting us to Allah. More to the point, the Tayyib way brings mindfulness to food, and so that you will, hopefully, inshallah, with Allah's help, you will be eating more sincerely, and you'll eat the foods you like without any guilt, and you will feel fuller into the bargain, and you'll control your weight. Now, that seems like a lot of hefty claims, but it works. Why? Because it's from Islam and it's always worked. Let me spell it out. So eating and fasting in a Tayyib way can make you feel more full and better nourished. And it's better than other methods because this isn't a fad. It's not a diet as such. It is the way in which you carry on. It's a sustainable way because Tayyib way affects the way the very things you buy. It'll affect your shopping list, and it'll affect the way in which you treat yourself when you sit with food. It affects even the color of your plates. We won't be able to cover all of that, but I hope we'll get a flavor for what Tayyib means in day-to-day life, and especially how it can be focused on in the month of Ramadan. Managing weight, when it boils down to the bare basics, is about two effective methods. Method 1, stop the body from building fat up, and method 2, encourage the body to burn fat for energy. The most effective way to do step 1 is to stop insulin from spiking upwards. We do that by reducing the sugar and the starches in our food. Rice, potatoes, soft breads, sweet foods, cheap carbohydrates. We have got far too used to that sedated feeling after a big meal. We mistake that for being full. That's not actually being full at all. That is a side effect of the insulin switch, which tells your body to slow down and divert all of its blood to your digestion because you have taken on so much rich food. And the rich food is empty of fats. So you don't really feel full. You're just sedated. And you feel bloated. The Tayyib method is moderation. Don't cut sweet foods out altogether, but do find a way to cut down. When you cut down, you replace. Replace the calories from sugar and starch with calories from fats, proteins, and fibrous starches. This means, in reality, eating high-quality Tayyib energy sources, like leafy vegetables, fibrous breads, and so on, properly farmed meats, vegetable fats from nuts, dairy cheeses, live yogurts, unprocessed vegetable oils, full-fat milk, and so on. Insulin will be kept low, and you will feel more genuinely full, not this sedated full. And the body gets less of a signal to build fat in the first place. Step 2, as you remember, is fasting. Not eating for a period long enough to help the body switch to burning fat. It's that simple. Fasting a couple of times a week is recommended by our Prophet, peace be upon him, but we also now see the profound wisdom of why he said himself that the finest kind of fasting was that of Dawood alayhi salam, the Prophet David, who fasted on alternate days. This is actually the perfect mathematical balance between feeding and fasting. Like so many things, we see that Allah has granted us a mercy. He knows we enjoy food, so He sent the Prophet as a mercy to us. We don't have to follow Dawood's way. The Prophet's twice-a-week method is more than sufficient to improve our health and lose excess weight, perfectly naturally, using the body's own systems rather than forcing it with pills and exercise and supplements. Both of these methods are actually far, far easier than all the years of wasted effort and expense, buying so-called healthy, fat-free foods, painfully cutting out enjoyable, wholesome, tasty foods rich in proteins and natural fats. And guess what? Islam has always advocated for eating those foods. Tayyib is the name of it, long before any modern trends came about. One philosophy we need to remember as part of Tayyib is moderation. So those with a sweet tooth need not be alarmed. While secular books on intermittent fasting would forbid you from eating white rice or having the odd chocolate bar, Islam is far more sympathetic to the human condition. Those foods become perfectly permissible, but you understand the Islamic way, and when you start fasting mindfully, you'll find that your wish to eat those food actually reduces. You will still eat them, and what's more, you will actually enjoy your time eating them rather than being laden with guilt afterwards. You'll get full and fed up of them, and you won't have to eat as much. You might ask, well, why doesn't it work for me so far, this fasting stuff? You'd be forgiven for thinking that it doesn't resonate with your experience. If fasting is the secret, how come it doesn't seem to work in Ramadan? Some of us lose weight, but many don't. What's going on? Well, it turns out we aren't paying attention to what Islam says other than the basic rules of don't eat during daylight. Tell me if you recognize these mistakes. We needlessly compensate. We eat excessive amounts of food, also very rich in sugary foods outside fasting times. We have false fears. We think of fasting as a difficult time where the aim is to survive a period of weakness and hunger with danger of collapse if we don't care. We're uninformed about good food types. Other than halal and haram, and that dates are good, we're not really aware of what types of foods Islam considers to be tayyib, actually healthy and good for us. We have an incomplete mindset. We conduct ourselves without much attention to the need to moderate our behaviors and reflect on a more gentle, calm, compassionate approach to things that fasting encourages. Other than switching off the TV, most of us don't know what to actually do, other than pray more. Otherwise, we find ourselves bored and sitting on our phones. Tell me if this isn't true. We're uninformed about good methods of eating. Few of us know the actual guidance about the order in which to eat our foods, how to sit and behave around food, how quickly or slowly to eat, how to chew, what kind of crockery is helpful. And we've become out of touch with genuine needs. Few of us understand the true nature and feeling of hunger and thirst. Most of us never actually encounter these, even in Ramadan. As we've discussed, mostly what we feel is the false hunger, and we'll talk about that in more detail later on. We're also misled by prejudice. We believe at a basic level that fasting is probably harmful, a bit like starvation, and that it puts our bodies at risk. Maybe it damages the kidneys or burns away muscle tissue. This is not only prejudicial, it's actually wrong, and we'll find out why later on as well. We're uninformed about the health benefits. We simply don't know that there are such principles as tayyib foods, the order in which to eat, or any such things, and even if we do, we secretly believe that they might just be Islamic traditions or ornaments, which may not have much roots in actual scientific evidence or medical difference. Nauzubillah, how wrong we have been. And actually, take this wrongness as good news, because it means that most of what we need to change is our knowledge. You don't have to try harder when fasting, or suffer even more with your food, or buy yet more expensive pills and powders or memberships to keep your health. No, quite the opposite, in fact. Life gets a lot simpler, cheaper, and easier. All of the advances in medical technology, be they drugs, techniques, and devices, have so far failed to address the problem of weight management adequately. Even what we thought was the most effective and invasive method, that of stomach banding surgery, which was so promising when it first became common around 20 years ago, is turning out to be seriously troublesome in the long term for at least a third of people who have it. Malnutrition, constant nausea and other gut-related problems, and mental health consequences are becoming a problem that surgeons are having to take notice of. Eating less calories, as opposed to outright fasting, doesn't seem to work on its own for people if they're just eating little and often. Exercising doesn't seem to impact weight as much as we were led to think. Diets and exercise plans can be mentally exhausting too, taking up a lot of attention and time. Anyone can lose weight if they focus on it without distraction of any kind, but when the diet or program is over, we can't keep up with it and the weight comes back. A few months later, we have no idea what the diet was about. What's worse, the industry blames the user. It's your fault, they say, for not being able to stick to the plan, which is so demanding that it takes all of your willpower to keep it up. Psychologically, this is setting you up to fail. We live in the real world, with work, family, distractions, and unexpected things. We need something that doesn't add to the number of things we have to do. So really, let's think about this another way. It has not been your fault. And you already know the basics of fasting as a Muslim anyway. You can, with a few further refinements, use fasting as a long-term part of a healthy Islamic lifestyle, like it was meant to be all along. What's more, it becomes consistently easier over time because the rewards grow. Plus, it's medically evidenced to be of extreme benefit. And finally, perhaps greatest of all, we get to follow the Prophet's ways and please Allah immensely into the bargain. So is it as easy as that? Well, on paper, it all seems so. But we are Muslims. We don't take things at face value without understanding them and working through the bugs. We investigate the facts and make adjustments along the way. We set goals for our worldly and our religious purposes. Instant Insights, one of my previous books, describes goal setting in greater detail. But the biggest challenges you will face are not the fasting or the eating part, but in preparing yourself to deal with the consequences of change. This change is a good one, undoubtedly, but all change requires adjustment. You have to adjust to the types and amounts of ingredients you choose to buy. You'll need to understand and discover who else can or will support you in this change. You need to prepare for the days before and after fasting and deal with the feelings on days that you don't fast. You'll have to change how and where you eat in accordance with your new practice. You'll have to change or adjust to how much you can deal with the interruptions or exceptional days when you just don't feel that into it or when fasting is not possible. And you need to increase the amount of kindness you show yourself. How much do you accept yourself? It doesn't help if you diet with the idea that you're somehow undesirable and unattractive, and you reach this target where you're transformed. You need to think of yourself as worthy, acceptable, and forgivable exactly as you are, and forgive yourself for mistakes which will inevitably arise. You'll need to reconsider your emotions around food. You might feel addicted, shameful, guilty about what you eat, or indifferent to it, not really caring about the taste. And your general levels of stress, mental health, and well-being will need to be taken into account. They will improve, but everything, even if it's positive, requires a bit of adjustment and energy. In committing to anything at all, never believe anyone who tells you that the same benefits come the same to everyone. Some people will put minimal effort and see maximum benefit, and other less fortunate folk will see the opposite. Most of us will put the effort in, and we must remain happy to know that this is the reasonable best you can do. You don't give 100% every day, that's just impossible. You put in a reasonable amount, taking life as it comes, and you aim for good results, but you cannot demand them. Results are up to Allah to decide. There is, however, one universal truth over and above all of this. The Tayyib way is the way for Muslims to do this. And whatever efforts you make, you will be earning the pleasure and attention of Allah, because this change is aligned to both your worldly goals and your religious ones. No other health plan or diet can claim such a thing. The physical advantages of fasting to anyone are weight loss by burning the body's own fat, increased metabolic rate. After a few days of fasting, metabolic rate can go up to around 13% higher than normal. Improved circulation in the brain and body generally as a result of heavy fats being removed. Improvement in insulin control for people with diabetes. Reduction in pain from arthritis and other weight-dependent conditions. Reduction in cancer risk due to the body consuming waste compounds better during the fasting state. Reduction in heart attack risk due to clearer arteries and less pressure on the organs through abdominal truncal fat. Increases in levels of beneficial hormones such as growth hormone, testosterone, and certain brain chemicals like BNFP, which goes up when you fast, helping the brain to restructure and repair neurons. Better immunity to infection and other diseases as well. In considering the mental advantages, just of fasting alone, improvements in energy level because of increased metabolic rate and because of a sense of being lighter, both in reality and mentally. Improvement in brain functioning, including attention and concentration. This has been shown in studies which are of people who are fasting compared to those who aren't. There is more stable emotional functioning because less swings in insulin and blood sugar lead to a better, more stable supply of energy to the brain. More immunity to stress because of being physically healthier and mentally feeling more on top of your own health and command of the environment. Better sleep, and this happens because there is less fat in the tissues surrounding the breathing passages, and fasting tends to restore and refresh one's sleep pattern. Reduced risk of memory problems and confusion due to dementia in old age. Studies have found that elderly people who do fasting seem to have better cognitive function, fending off the effects of depression and memory loss. And better control of poor eating habits and hunger, because impulse control is improved and we get command over things like false hunger when we fast. But that is just fasting without the Tayyib element. There is a whole load of other things which happens when you add the Tayyib layer. It goes on to make it much more complete and much more part of your lifestyle. It has a deeply peaceful and gentle philosophy, a mental and spiritual set of guidelines and aims, which bring us a number of additional benefits. These are all together at a higher level. There is an improved sense of self-worth, self-care, and attention to our environment by looking at the Islamic philosophy for how we eat and how we regard the provisions of Allah. There is the feeling, the reality of what Allah has told us about the precious nature of our food, about moderating our relationships with others, and the precious nature of all things in this world. There is better conduct and character through reducing unnecessary behavior, through examining our excesses and our habits and our addictions, and being more gentle and more reflective and more modest. There are improvements in energy and concentration and physical ability to praise Allah and carry out other duties in the course of Muslim life. There is better resistance against bad decisions. There is a control over the excesses of the nafs overall, with better control over anger, Islamic techniques to manage emotions and anger, reduce impulsivity, remember our better conducts, to seek refuge in Allah, and be more resistant to making bad decisions. There is also the community sense, a sense of unity in purpose and improved motivation that comes from that. So many millions of Muslims fast with us. The Prophet himself did it. And they fast the same 2 days per week as we might. Of course, there are the immense blessings from doing an activity that Allah himself is very pleased by. Of course, the Tayyib method includes eating more nutritious and better tasting foods, so we take into account the other days, not just the fasting days. We consume less wastefully, and we are more mindful of the environment, and taking on the Tayyib way can, if we all do it, result in better living conditions and treatment of animals. Think about the impact that we can have. We learn how to eat with greater attention and enjoyment because we learn from the Islamic way how to time our foods, when to eat, how slowly to eat, even the color of our plates. We get to examine hunger and other emotions more closely. We can separate out the false from the real in a much more deep way, because fasting in Islam is never far from the act of reflection and appreciation for which it was always intended. We get the benefits of greater patience. We regain a sense of mastery over our lives, reclaiming time to spend it in better ways, such as with our community and our families, the things that Islam stresses are important, rather than being distracted by things which we have struggled with but not succeeded with. We get to focus on the here and now more attentively. We can live well today. We don't need to have targets as such, or just go through phases of difficulty like diets would suggest. We get less drawn into concerns about the future or the past. We live for today. We have a far better ability to see out difficulties and setbacks. We see from the guidance of Allah that difficulties are just as they are, temporary things, and they are opportunities to gain blessing. And when we organize our life for the fasting days we do, we actually end up being more efficient, rearranging our time around the things of fasting, and we cut out the unnecessary and focus more on the good, the wholesome, and the useful. If someone very important to you lent you something precious, like an expensive car, I'm sure you would look after it properly before giving it back. You wouldn't set out to damage it. Sure, the lender would understand if the car got a bit of wear and tear under your custody, and if you borrowed it for several years, it would show normal signs of age. If an accident befell it, you'd do your best to get it fixed properly. Now, suppose the owner has asked you to return it. It's been several years. You tried to look after it, but somehow it just didn't work out too well. Somehow the car got worn down and ended up in a poor state. Obviously now you're gripped by worry. Any decent person would be. You look at the poor car and your heart sinks. How did this happen? Maybe the maintenance instructions you were given were wrong. Maybe you had such a busy and demanding life that you failed to look after it as you should have. Maybe the instructions were fine, but you read them wrong. Maybe you became sick and couldn't look after it in the last few months or years. Or maybe, as sometimes happens, you occasionally misused the car because it was fun or convenient to do so. You drove it on rough roads, you gave it cheap fuel, or you didn't change the oil to save a few pennies. So the person who lent it to you now looks at you. It turns out that they knew how you treated it. Maybe it has one of those dash cams in it that you didn't know about. If you had done your best and failed, the owner would not hold it against you at all. But if you mistreated it, he would surely be disappointed, as would you. Now, Allah lent us our bodies. Our bodies are mere vessels for our souls. So we are due to return our bodies when we die. And Allah can of course recall the debt at any time. I believe that most people don't set out to damage their bodies. For one thing, much of the information we've learned about what's good for you, how to manage your weight and so on, has been totally wrong, or at best, unrealistic. Sure, we also neglect our bodies sometimes, but I truly believe that if we knew how to look after them more easily, we would take greater pride in them, because it's a virtuous circle. Better care leads to better results, and vice versa. In the end, when we are taken, we would like to return our bodies in a reasonably sound state. We all think we have some idea about what to eat and what to avoid in terms of halal and haram and healthy and unhealthy. Applying the Tayyib rules really puts the shine, the finish, and gives you a much better chance than you've had until now. Well-being is more than just the absence of illness. Well-being is a state being positively connected to the ingredients of a fulfilled life. A picture comes to mind. 5 different characteristics or components of well-being. Firstly, a higher purpose, a life with meaning. Second, mastery, knowing a skill or trade or doing something which sets you apart. Thirdly, autonomy, freedom and free will. Fourth, relatedness, belonging and being connected to others. And last of all, but not least, moments of joy peppering your days. So these 5 broad factors make up well-being. We talk about them in more detail in other books like Instant Actions especially, but here we'll describe how well-being is connected to the Tayyib life. Higher purpose is particularly important. Well-being comes from having a life of purpose. The Muslim has less difficulty than others in that department because we are, after all, here by Allah's will, and our purpose is to be of good character and to show commitment to what Allah has instructed us to do. Alongside this, there is the real meaning of being a Muslim. Someone who has found peace in submitting to Allah's will. We are commanded to regard ourselves as the products of Allah's will and to thankfully accept all of our gifts, our flaws and limitations. Our value lies within this, not within our appearance or other superficial things. We should make effort to look after our bodies, but not for the sake of feeling worthy. We're already worthy. We look after our bodies because we are looking after what Allah has lent to us. And as a result, we experience better well-being and we live longer with Allah's permission. This is true meaning, and this is reflecting good character. Secondly, mastery. Well, mastery is also known as competence. Skills and knowledge are required to achieve most worthy things. So mastery is a process where we work on becoming more skilled or capable at any given activity or task, whether it be understanding ourselves or learning a new skill or profession. Simply learning the knowledge feels good and contributes to our overall well-being, our sense of being at ease with and understanding the world. In an indirect way, becoming healthier even has an enabling effect on other parts of life. If you have a healthier weight, you are physically more capable to do things which you could not do as well before. You could play sports better, be fitter to make trips or journeys, or put your sharpened mind to use by learning other things. Despite the stereotypes of thinkers or intellectuals being unhealthy, it's actually true that people who succeed for longer in intellectual fields generally have better health and well-being to thank for their enduring success. Too many intellectuals, on the other hand, fall prey to poor physical health by neglecting it in favor of doing their job or just pursuing their intellectual interest. The brain and the body are connected. Both need looking after. Third component is relatedness. Islam is nothing if not practical and grounded. Allah is fully aware that most people's thinking is dramatically influenced by their nafs. People cannot help but judge themselves and others by appearance, loyalty, status, first impressions, and so on. Being healthier, looking healthier, all make a better impression on others. This is not an ideal world, but it is a reality. People with better appearance in terms of their weight and self-care have better chances of getting jobs, being promoted, having better social encounters, and earning more money. This is a sad but real fact, and it's reflected in the advice we're given to look after our health. The external world remains a judgmental place, unfortunately so we might as well play to win by doing whatever we can to get that foothold upwards, if that's what we seek. Allah doesn't judge us on these things, but the material world does, and there is an indirect connection between this reality and our own iman. If you have more money or a nicer job, or have a wider circle of help or influential people, you could use that status to make that work in your favor by making time, and when you make more time, you're more able to focus on matters of deen rather than worrying about income and so on. Relating to the self is also part of relatedness. In relating to yourself, I would of course advise you to not regard your weight or appearance as determining your value, but this is, however, difficult to do, and moreover, is not quite what I'm suggesting. We can't ignore the nafs altogether. It's like an alarm system that gets louder the more you ignore it. Much of our well-being comes from working alongside the desires of the nafs in a measured and sympathetic way. Coax it along, and we give it a little bit of what makes it happy. So, if you feel unhappy because of your weight, don't ignore the feeling, even if it is a little irrational. Accept the feeling as a part of yourself, as you should do with every feeling. This is the nature of emotions. Accepting them doesn't mean you agree with them, but it does mean you stop trying to fight them or ignore them. You try to listen to the sensible message hidden sometimes within the extreme rational message. And that sensible message might just be, well, look after your health. Get into good shape if you can. You can hear that in your heart or in your intellect. And when you do so, you've helped your nafs to feel listened to. It gets calmer as a result. And then you can direct yourself towards planned efforts to look after your health. Tayyib is exactly such a way. It coordinates all the parts of you towards a virtuous and good end. Autonomy, the fourth part of our well-being diagram, is about exercising our free will and having a sense of being in command, to do as we wish, and to be accountable and responsible for our actions in life. This might seem slightly scary, but in reality it adds to our strength. True well-being improves when we take responsibility for our thoughts and actions, embracing our errors and successes all alike. It's a very empowering feeling. We become more realistic and more grounded, and our real freedom actually increases because we are more connected to the effects we are having on the world. Here's one small example. If we're out shopping for food and pass by some rows of sugary snacks, we may feel tempted to pick some up. We get home and eat them and then feel bad for having strayed from our rules. Autonomy will help us if we look back at the situation and take responsibility for our actions, reflecting on them, and seeing them as something we did. Even if we lost control, we still are able to look at what it took for us to lose control and break it down to hopefully prevent it from happening again. So let's break it down. Firstly, you chose to go down the aisle of junk food in the supermarket, and that's where temptation got the better of you. So for one thing, you understand that free will is difficult to control in the face of temptation. You can then plan better. What do you do next time? You avoid going down that aisle in future. That's one half of the problem solved. Secondly, You felt good while eating the sweets or chocolates or other snacks that you bought. I mean, that's why you ate them. They gave you a short period of pleasure. You might feel bad afterwards, but there was a time of enjoyment. Accepting the enjoyment is the key to making a better plan in future. So what can you do? Well, one option is to plan to buy the snacks at a given time rather than deny them forever. Once a week, you might get 1 or 2 of those snacks. You still get the pleasure and you get to eat them, but 2 things have changed. First, you get to enjoy them without that sense of guilt. And secondly, next time you get tempted, you're able to tell yourself that you'll indeed buy the snack, but at a time that you have set aside. For some temptations and pleasures which are halal, delaying them is better than outright denial. That way the nafs isn't provoked into guilt or escalation. It's given a little bit of what it wants, and we can move on. As a result, you notice that you actually binge far less often. Subhanallah. And finally, let's look at moments of joy as part of well-being. A fulfilled life is dotted with little moments every day when we can truly take pleasure in appreciating and savoring good things. A smile, a pretty scene, a magnificent creation of Allah in nature, or any pleasure from the senses. In food, we have been given a chance to relish its taste, its provision, and the opportunity that the occasion of mealtime gives us to connect with our families and friends. So there is joy in the act of eating. Eating any food is a chance to immerse our senses in the thankfulness and in that moment in itself. Allah instructs us to respect the food, pay attention to it, and nothing else while you eat. We have to eat slowly, mindfully, bringing ourselves to that moment. Trying this with even the most humble food can be a total revolution. Tayyib foods are by far the finest in their mix of natural, deep flavors and nourishment. Allah instructs us to show good character and kindness in the way we treat His creations, looking after our crops and animals in a way that doesn't harm them or force them to grow unnaturally. If you don't farm it yourself, make an effort to buy things which have been produced responsibly and kindly. Every penny you spend in this way changes the way we treat the world for the better. This in itself should rightly give you a sense of deep joy. You have become more integrated and consistent in your approach to life all round. What's more, you'll be buying foods that are actually better for you, as we discussed earlier. Inshallah, Allah will bless us for having heard and shared this knowledge today, and may Allah make it easy and beneficial for all of us to do His bidding and to have an enjoyable Ramadan. Ameen.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. TK Harris. That was amazing. That was so mind-blowing. Especially if you look at the statistics right now. I mean, mental health is on a decline with increasing rates of depression and suicide and behavior problems and ADHD and neurodevelopmental disorders. I mean, suicide risks, again, even amongst children are on a rise. Our weight, now that you talked about, like, subhanAllah, how to lose weight, that is on a rise. Roughly 40% of adults worldwide are obese or overweight, and 60% of Americans are either overweight and obese. And actually, it's not even just affecting us, but it's affecting our children, where the obesity rates have doubled in more than 70 countries since 1980s and tripled in children. And then especially in Arab countries, adolescent obesity has reached a critical level. So with all of this chronic disease and mental health issues and obesity on a rise, Jazakallah khair, Dr. TK Harris, for that really beneficial talk.
And you know what? I really liked that he reiterated a couple times that it's not your fault if you don't, because most people really don't know. But so when you know better, you do better. But that's an important point, because I think a lot of people get really frustrated. They try to eat healthier, but they really don't understand what's in the food, what's going on, all the hormone disruptors and things that like they're eating right, but yet nothing's changing, or they're still not getting rid of illnesses. So that was really informative because it goes deeper than just, what is eating healthy anyway. Today, that's so, vague. We need to go more specific than that.
Absolutely. And then how our nafs is involved. And so how just the tayyib food influences.
You're cutting out a little bit.
How the tayyib food influences everything down to our genetic code and our nafs.
Yes.
So it's really powerful on how living a more mindful life can really, inshallah, optimize this next Ramadan. Awesome.
Yeah, I think it has to do with a lot of bringing things down to the moment as well. Yesterday I did a talk with, it was Friday now, with Susan Labadi. We talked about mindfulness, and you were there. You chimed in, and she has such a good way of like bringing things down to the moment. And we live in such a fast-paced life. No matter what country you're in today, it just seems like you can't keep up with the pace of things. And, I think they say, like, there's a saying, sharpen your saw. That's a common phrase in business, right? Sharpen your saw. It means you need to get ahead in some area. But in order to do that, you need to take many steps back to fix what's not working. And when you invest your time in that, then you can go further and faster once you've done it. So for a lot of people who are really struggling, it's like getting this information right now, and then using Ramadan as this time to regroup and recenter. And then after Ramadan, inshallah, we're going to see amazing results. And maybe we can come back after Ramadan and do something else where we kind of see how everybody did.
Absolutely. And again, I know Dr. TK Harris has great resources. He has amazing books. I know Yvonne and I have books and free ebooks. Did you want to go ahead and talk about yours really quick again, to talk about, like, because people need resources.
Yeah.
Dr. TK Harris has great resources. I know both of us have great resources.
Well, when I'll just say this, when I wrote the Summer Ramadan Cooking Cookbook, and here's my copy. When I wrote this book, really what I was trying to do was I was trying to illustrate that, in a summer Ramadan, we needed to healthily rehydrate ourselves and to have nutrient-dense foods that were easy to make, and they didn't stick to one specific ethnicity, because I, for one, grew up in the U.S., Italian, Puerto Rican background. I was not always comforted by foods outside of that box, right? So everyone has their comfort food in Ramadan, but it was about whatever you choose in Ramadan to be healthy and to try to be seasonal in your pickings, and and then take it from there. I've learned a lot more since writing that book, and I think the recipes were really good, really delicious. But I'm even simplifying things even more today. These are great recipes for parties and entertaining as well. But the book, the next book I wrote, which was the My Halal Kitchen book, I consider that the Halal 101, foundational cooking, not just how to make any cuisine halal, without the pork, without the alcohol, but the entire preface of the book is why halal. Why is it so important? And it really goes into what is in our food, what is an emulsifier, what is rennet, what are enzymes, and that's a little bit of
educates us about what we're actually putting in our bodies.
Right. It's a little bit of wonky science, nerdy, stuff about what's in our food. But the more I learned, and the more I even talked to people who are not Muslim, but they just were interested in halal, they were so appreciative of the fact that, I was kind of telling them, like, hey, this is in your bread. This is in your yogurt. And a lot of times, like Muslims, I think we do two things. Sometimes we say, yeah, I know what halal is. You don't have to tell me. Or they say, well, as long as it's halal, I'm fine if it's labeled. And what I'm trying to say is, really don't know what you don't know unless you, because some of the stuff in the food industry is like almost like food industry secret in a way. You have to sort of be in it to kind of know it. And then even I always learn more and more. And I say, oh my God, I have to bring this down to the level that the consumers can digest easier, because there's all this food science and it's like, it's out there. But what it boils down to is like these really weird ingredients of things they're putting in food that are not, sometimes they're not even edible things. And Europe doesn't even allow some of this stuff. So there's a bit of like halal, there's a bit of like, it might be quote unquote halal, but it's like weird stuff. And I think we kind of have to just really get it, you know, and that, so I tried to write that book with like, use this book, you know, you don't have to even cook those recipes in there. They're just foundational to show you that why I want you to consider what's in your bread. If you're not going to make my bread recipe, that's fine. But now you know why I put a bread recipe in there. So if you say, I can't find any good bread with totally halal ingredients, I've got a really simple bread recipe to make for myself. So it's about being self-reliant in that sense and being, you know, relying on Allah and then doing your own thing. Yogurts, salad dressings. You can't believe what's in some of this stuff. So recipes for those things, broths, chicken broth, lamb broth, beef broth. You can find a halal grocery store, but a lot of people tell me, well, I don't want to go to my halal grocery store because I don't trust it. Well, that's a problem. Okay, so if you can't find a great halal broth, and there aren't very many on the market, you can make your own. If you find a trusted source of meats, get those bones. And I know you're a huge proponent of bone broth. So these are the things I tried to put in that book because I wanted it to be the one thing on everyone's shelf that would say, I can grab this and I can make any cuisine in the world. I can substitute wine. I can substitute beer. I can substitute pork for Latin food, for French food, for Italian food, because I want to eat all of the cuisines around the globe. But I have my substitutes now, and they're really delicious. There's nothing weird about that.
Yeah, and there's nothing junk. There's nothing hiding in it.
There's nothing hiding. There's nothing unnatural. I don't even put like, you know, soy chorizo or anything. That I give like examples of where you can find a really good you know, halal type of chorizo or something like that, because I'm going for flavor as well. I want to eat really well. I don't want to skimp on things, but I don't want to go crazy. I just want people to have the tools to do it themselves. And that way there's no excuse.
Yeah. No, it's really powerful. I know I've done the same thing with my ebook. I have some recipes in there. Obviously, Yvonne's is a lot more recipes. I just have a couple of recipes, but just like these practical things that we're talking about. I know that Dr. T.K. Harris has great resources. So what we're trying to show you is that there's so many resources out there, you guys.
Yes.
I'm living this lifestyle. Yvonne's living this lifestyle. Dr. T.K. Harris is living this lifestyle. And then all the other speakers that we're going to come on today, inshallah, are going to live this lifestyle. So again, it's super powerful. And then as we're waiting for the other speakers to come on, inshallah, I think we're waiting for one more. Yes, inshallah. But as we're waiting, we can ask like one. Why don't we do 1 or 2 questions?
There was one question that came on my page. I thought it was a great one for you, Madiha. Do you mind taking it?
Absolutely.
Let me find it. She asked the question. Okay. She says, I want to know your opinion about detoxing, particularly the liver, since I know I have a fatty liver. How often, and are there specific foods that will detox the liver?
So they talked about fatty liver, and then fatty liver is directly related to the reason why people have fatty liver is because they're pre-diabetic or insulin resistant.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And it's actually now one of the leading causes of liver disease that actually takes people's lives is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease that then turns into cirrhosis. So again, our lifestyles are really important to help prevent that. And once you start eating a more tayyib lifestyle, once you start to, just taking care of the body that Allah has given us, our liver just naturally starts to detox. Isn't that so subhanAllah?
SubhanAllah.
It's just so awesome. I love it.
Yeah, some people, might think that they can't reverse those types of things. And I think a lot of people are really like taken aback that like, well, I don't drink alcohol, or I'm not, drinking a lot of alcohol, or whatever it might be. But when you really look at the diet, I know people who have it, and it's like they drink a lot of sugary drinks or a lot of carbs without balancing it out with, good proteins and things like that. So, we're learning a lot about our bodies and our health today.
Yeah, we are. It's really, there we go. We got all our speakers